In the land of Mbanza, morning begins not with noise, but with rhythm, the steady heartbeat of drums echoing from distant hills. The earth seems alive beneath bare feet, humming with stories that only the elders remember. Smoke curls from clay huts, carrying the scent of roasted maize and river fish. Children chase one another through the dusty paths, their laughter floating through the golden air like music. But not all sounds are laughter. Behind every smile, whispers move like wind through tall grass. They speak of strange dreams, of children waking with new eyes and old words. Some say the ancestors walk again, unseen yet near. Others murmur that the spirits grow restless, waiting for something, or someone, to disturb their long sleep. At the edge of Mbanza, where the baobabs cast their long shadows, stands a house painted in sunlight. Its yellow walls gleam like a morning blessing, and the yard is filled with the echo of little feet and happy songs. On the walls, tiny handprints in red and blue cover the wood, the marks of children who passed through its doors. Inside, Mama Nyasha's voice rises above the laughter. Her lullabies weave through the air like silk, old songs carried down through generations. With every note, the restless child becomes still, the crying baby smiles, and even the wildest heart softens. "Shh," she whispers, brushing a tear from a boy's cheek. "The ancestors hear every cry. Let them bring you peace." To many, she is a blessing, the woman who heals with her hands and sings away sorrow. They call her Mother of Calm, Keeper of Joy. But others walk past her house with uneasy hearts. "Too much laughter can wake the spirits," an old man once said, shaking his head. And her laughter, it never grows old. When Mama Nyasha walks through the village, her steps are soft, yet they command silence. Her face glows with kindness, her voice warm like the sun on maize fields. But her eyes hold storms. They are deep and old, carrying the memory of 1,000 births and a single loss no one dares to speak of. At the market, the women greet her with smiles mixed with curiosity. "Mama Nyasha," they say, "your hands are blessed. My baby no longer cries at night since you touched her head." She nods, her smile gentle. "Every child carries the voice of the ancestors," she answers. "Sometimes they just need to be reminded to listen." But when she turns away, the women whisper among themselves. "Did you see her eyes?" One murmurs. "They say she speaks to shadows when the moon is full." Another lowers her voice. "Maybe that's why her house never darkens, even when the lamps go out." That night, as the drums of Mbanza fade and the wind cools the air, Mama Nyasha sits alone in her yard. The children are gone, the laughter still echoes faintly. She hums a low tune, not the kind for play, but for remembrance. Her gaze lifts to the moon, full and heavy with light. "Are you proud of me?" she whispers to the night. "I have kept my promise." A soft wind stirs the leaves of the baobab. Somewhere deep in the shadows, a whisper answers. Not cruel, not kind, just ancient. Promises to spirits are never kept without cost. Mama Nyasha closes her eyes, and the house painted in sunshine grows quiet, too quiet. Even the crickets seem to hold their breath, as if the land itself knows that beneath her calm, something sacred, something sorrowful, waits to rise again. And so begins the tale of Mama Nyasha of Mbanza, the widow with two faces, whose love for children was as deep as her grief, and whose laughter carried both life and loss in equal measure. The moon hung low over Mbanza, casting silver light across the rooftops. Laughter still echoed in the evenings, but something in that laughter had changed. Once bright and careless, it now sounded hollow, like wind passing through empty gourds. Mothers began to whisper. Fathers frowned in silence. The children, once wild as goats in the field, now sat still, their eyes fixed on the distant hills as if watching invisible spirits dance. Some sang old songs that no one had taught them. Others wept softly in their sleep. "Ah, Mama Nyasha blesses them," the young mothers said with hope in their hearts. But the elders shook their heads, their wrinkled eyes shadowed with memory. "No," they muttered, "she changes them. The same way the river changes the stone, slowly, but forever." And though no one dared speak it aloud, The village began to fear the sound of children's laughter. Far beyond the yam fields lived Queasy, a widow with a heart scarred by loss. Since her husband's death, life had turned heavy, every sunrise another burden to carry. Her son, Temba, had once been her joy, but now his mischief brought shame. He chased goats through other people's gardens, stole mangoes before they ripened, and mocked the elders when they scolded him. Each night, Queasy sat before her fire and prayed, "O ancestors, guide me. Give my son peace. Let him hear my voice again." But her prayers seemed to vanish into the smoke. The neighbors pitied her. "That boy has fire in his blood," they said. "Only Mama Nyasha knows how to tame fire." And though Queasy's heart trembled, she began to wonder if the whispers might be true. The day came when Temba's mischief crossed the line. He stole coins from the market and laughed when caught, calling the elder woman who owned them blind as an owl. That night, Queasy's tears flowed freely. "Where did I go wrong?" she cried into her hands. An old neighbor, her face like dried earth, placed a hand on Queasy's shoulder. "Take him to Mama Nyasha," she said softly. "The woman has a gift. She can quiet storms inside a child." Fear stirred within Queasy like a restless spirit. Yet desperation is stronger than fear. At dawn, she took her son's hand and began the long walk toward the house painted in sunshine. The wooden walls of Mama Nyasha's daycare glowed beneath the morning light, bright yellow against the dark soil. Children's laughter floated from within, soft and haunting, like a song from another world. Mama Nyasha stood at the doorway, her smile gentle, her eyes deep as the river. "Welcome, Queasy," she said. "Your heart is tired," Queasy bowed her head. "My son has lost his way." Mama Nyasha looked at Temba, who kicked the dust defiantly. She reached into her basket and pulled out a small wooden doll, carved with care and bound in red thread. "He will not be alone," she said, handing it to him. "This will remind him to listen." As the day went on, strange music drifted from the daycare, low hums that made the leaves tremble. When dusk arrived, Queasy returned to find Temba standing quietly at the gate, his mischief gone. His eyes looked far away, and his small hand clutched the wooden doll tightly. That night, as the wind whispered through the grass, Queasy awoke to the sound of her son's voice. "Mama," he whispered, his tone flat and distant. "The children beneath the floor are cold." The fire dimmed. The air grew heavy, and in that stillness, Queasy understood that peace could sometimes come wearing the mask of something else entirely. The mornings in Mbanza began to change. At first, it was only a sound, a faint humming that floated through the air before the rooster's call. It came from Queasy's hut, where little Temba now woke before the sun. His mother thought it was a child's tune, soft and harmless. But as the days passed, the sound grew heavier, filled with something too old for his young tongue. When he hummed, the birds stopped their singing, and even the trees seemed to lean in to listen. The wind carried his melody through the village, and mothers drew their children closer. It was a song no one taught him, yet one that every soul somehow remembered. The elders of Mbanza gathered beneath the great baobab when the humming would not cease. Their eyes, clouded with age and wisdom, met in uneasy silence. "These are not the songs of children," murmured Elder Bako, his voice trembling. "They are the songs of the river pact, the ones sung when the ancestors walked among the living." The others shifted uneasily. The river pact was not to be spoken of. It was an old promise between the living and the dead, sealed long before memory had names. If those songs were returning, then balance had been broken. That night, when the children played, their laughter carried an edge of fear. Even their games turned strange. They spoke in whispers, they stared at the shadows, and when Temba began to hum again, they fell silent, one by one. The air felt thick, alive, as if listening. Soon, Queasy began to notice the drawings. The walls of their hut, once plain, now bore strange shapes scrawled in charcoal and ash. There were children without faces, standing hand in hand beneath a red moon. A tall woman stood among them, her eyes hollow, her arms open wide as if calling them home. Rivers ran through the drawings, but the rivers bled light, not water. "Temba," Queasy whispered one morning. "What are these pictures, my son?" He looked at her with an expression she could not read. "They are memories," he said softly, his voice distant. "They come when I sleep. They want to be seen." Queasy's heart pounded. She washed the walls, but by morning, the drawings returned, sharper, clearer, more alive. Then came the day the drums fell silent. The children were playing outside Mama Nyasha's daycare when the rhythm of the village, that steady heartbeat of Mbanza, suddenly stopped. Every drummer froze mid-beat, their hands suspended, their eyes wide. The sound that had carried through generations vanished into stillness. Queasy rushed outside, her chest tight. "Why have the drums stopped?" she asked, but no one answered. In the middle of the playground stood Temba, his eyes lifted toward the horizon. His carved wooden doll hung loosely in his hand. He spoke softly, but his words carried across the air like thunder. "They remember me now." Across the air like thunder. "They remember me now." The wind rose without warning, swirling dust and whispers through the village. The baobab leaves trembled as if recognizing a voice long forgotten. And from that day onward, the people of Mbanza no longer asked why the drums were silent. They only prayed that one morning they would begin again, and that when they did, the song would still belong to the living. The morning sun cast long shadows over Mbanza as the air thickened with silence. From the dusty path leading to Mama Nyasha's yellow house came the sound of slow, measured steps, the kind that carried both age and purpose. Elder Mbeki appeared at the gate, his frame bent but unbroken, his hand gripping a carved staff made of ebony and bone. Each tap of the staff on the earth echoed like a drumbeat of judgment. His eyes, deep and storm-dark, studied the house where laughter once lived but now carried the weight of whispers. Children froze mid-play, and even the wind held its breath. "Mama Nyasha," he called, his voice coarse like old bark. "The ancestors walk again. Have you prepared your heart for their return?" She came out slowly, her head bowed beneath a red shawl, eyes glistening with something between fear and reverence. "Elder," she said softly, "my heart has never stopped walking with them." Mbeki's gaze did not waver. "Then you know why I have come. The oath you swore by the river spirits, the one sealed with grief and blood, it stirs once more." He lifted his staff, tracing a symbol in the air. "You begged the waters to listen, and they did. But the ancestors remember your debt, child of sorrow. They always remember." A trembling passed through her. The ground beneath her feet seemed to hum faintly at first, then deeper, as though the earth itself recalled her sin. Years ago, before her hair turned silver and her laughter turned thin, Mama Nyasha had been a mother. Only once. Her son had been her sunrise, her heartbeat. But the fever came without warning, burning through the village like a spirit unchained. No healer could name it, no herb could cure it. Night after night she sang to the boy as his body turned to ash beneath her hands. When the final breath left him, the sound that escaped her throat was not a cry, but a silence so heavy it cracked something deep inside her. Her heart became the hollow of a drum, empty, echoing, waiting for another rhythm to fill it. In her grief, she walked far beyond the edge of the living, past the tall grass that whispered of warning, past the stones marked with curses. The moon was a pale watcher that night, and the river shimmered with an unholy glow. She knelt at its edge, her tears falling into the black water. "Take me," she begged, "or take my sorrow, but do not take the children of this village. Let my pain feed their peace." The river moved like something alive. From its depths rose voices, soft, layered, ancient. "We can give what you ask," they whispered. "But know this, mortal mother. Every gift we give has a shadow. Will you bear it?" Her voice trembled. "I will bear anything if no child in Mbanza suffers as mine did." The river answered with silence, and then a single ripple reached her feet, cold and deep. From that night on, her wish was granted, but her love was twisted by the deep. The river spirits gave her what she asked for. Every child she touched grew stronger, wiser, gentler. But within each of them lived a fragment, a flicker of her lost son's soul, bound by sorrow that could not die. At first, she thought it was a blessing. The children laughed brighter, learned faster, and dreamed in colors unseen. Yet sometimes, when the moon hung red and heavy, their eyes turned distant, as if something ancient watched through them, and in their sleep they called her by a name no living tongue should know. The house she built became a place both blessed and haunted. Laughter filled its walls by day, but at night, the air thickened with the hum of unseen songs. Parents spoke with gratitude, saying, "Mama Nyasha's hands are blessed." But the elders, wise and weary, shook their heads. "Blessings," they whispered, "can sometimes wear the face of sorrow." And as the sun sank behind the baobab trees, Mama Nyasha sat alone by the window of her yellow house, her eyes reflecting the river far away and the memory of a promise she could never unmake. The whispers began softly, like wind through dry grass. One woman telling another, one prayer turning into warning. Soon the whole of Mbanza spoke her name with both reverence and dread. Some still called her Mama of Light, the woman who tamed wild hearts and soothed restless children. But others whispered in low tones, "She feeds on innocence. Her laughter hides the sound of crying that is not her own." At night, mothers locked their doors tight, clutching their children close as they listened to the far-off sound of weeping carried by the wind. No one could tell if it came from the daycare or from the spirits wandering the fields. By the fireside, old women shook their heads. "When blessings grow too bright," one said, "they cast the longest shadows." Soon, the children began to speak in ways that made even the elders grow silent. Little ones who had never left the village described dreams of rivers glowing with faces that smiled and wept all at once. They spoke of a boy who waited by the water, calling them by names they had never heard before. "My name is Temba," some of them said in their sleep, though Temba lived and breathed among them. Others whispered, "The river is full of songs. Mama Nyasha sings there too." The elders exchanged fearful glances. "Those are not dreams," murmured Elder Mbeki, his voice dry as leaves. "Those are memories that do not belong to them." One evening, as the sun sank behind the hills, Kwezi watched her son closely. His eyes no longer held the restless mischief she once scolded him for. They were calm now, too calm. When he looked at her, she felt as if another child stared from behind his gaze, older, wiser, and burdened with sorrow. "Temba," she said gently, "why do you look at me that way?" He smiled faintly, his voice low. "You used to sing by the river when I was small." Her breath caught. "I never sang by the river, my son." He tilted his head, as though listening to something only he could hear. "She did," he whispered. "Mama Nyasha sang there. She said the water remembers us all." And for a heartbeat, Kwezi swore she heard another child's laughter inside her son's voice. Faint, echoing wrong. Love, however, is a stubborn thing. Blind, loyal, unwilling to see what the heart cannot bear. Kwezi's fear grew, but her gratitude chained it. Mama Nyasha saved him, she told herself. She tamed his wildness, gave him peace. How can I doubt her? Her friends warned her in hushed tones. "You should keep him close," one said. "There are things in her house that don't sleep." But Kwezi turned away. "You speak from envy," she replied. "You would rather see my son lost again than believe in mercy." That night, she lay awake beside Temba, watching him breathe, watching the shadows dance across his face. He looked peaceful, too peaceful. Outside, the wind carried the faint hum of a lullaby. It was Mama Nyasha's voice, singing to no one and to everyone at once. Then came the girl called Nia. She was quiet and bright, her laughter quick like sparrow wings. But one morning she fell sick without reason. Her fever burned hot, and her tongue spoke riddles no one understood. "The river is not just water," she murmured, eyes unfocused. "It drinks tears and gives back names." Her mother wailed beside her, calling for the healer, but Nia only smiled faintly and whispered, "The children are not lost. They are waiting for the tide." Elder Mbeki came to her bedside, his face pale. "Child," he said softly. Who speaks through you? Nia's eyes turned toward him, but her voice was not her own. It carried the echo of rushing waters. The debt must be paid. The river never forgets. And when her head fell back onto the mat, the hut filled with the sound of distant humming, the same tune Temba had sung beneath the moon. The wind outside grew cold, carrying a message that chilled every soul in Mbanza. The river was calling again. The night was thick with silence, the kind that pressed against the skin like damp cloth. The villagers had gone to rest, but the air still carried the faint echo of sorrow. From the far end of Mbanza came a voice, soft, trembling, and strange. Little Nia stood in the moonlight, her small frame swaying as though the wind itself moved her. Her eyes were closed, yet her lips moved with the rhythm of something ancient. She spoke names no one had uttered for generations, names carved once into the stones by the river, names of the dead who had never found rest. Nkosi, Amara, Luthando, she whispered. Each name rolled off her tongue like a prayer and a curse joined together. The elders gathered, fear knotting their throats. Old Babadumo leaned on his staff, his voice trembling. This is not the voice of a child, he muttered. This is the river speaking. But others shook their heads. It is the spirit of the forgotten calling for justice, said Mama Nyasha, her eyes fixed on Nia. Kwezi stepped forward, her heart pounding. Mama Nyasha, why does she speak their names? Why does she sound like them? The old woman did not answer. Her face was shadowed, her gaze distant, as if she saw something far beyond the present world. When Nia began to hum again, the ground beneath her seemed to sigh. The flame of the nearby torches flickered, and even the night birds fell silent. One of the mothers screamed, clutching her child. She's cursed. The child has been taken by the soul stealer. Mama Nyasha raised her hand for silence. No child is cursed. The spirits only borrow what they are owed, she said softly. But her voice shook, betraying fear she dared not show. As the chanting grew louder, the people backed away. Nia's small hands lifted toward the sky as though she were calling the moon itself to listen. Then, just as suddenly, she fell silent. A wind blew through the square, cold, mournful, carrying the faint sound of weeping. And in that moment, Kwezi saw it, Mama Nyasha's shadow stretching long and dark across the ground, merging with Nia's. For a heartbeat, it looked like one soul wearing two faces. The villagers whispered among themselves, some in prayer, others in accusation. One old woman murmured, "If this is mercy, then it sounds like mourning." Mama Nyasha turned to them, her eyes glistening. "The ancestors speak because the living have forgotten to listen," she said. But Kwezi knew then, whatever truth hid beneath those words, it was wrapped in sorrow deeper than any river's song. The night was no longer just night. It had become a living thing, watching, waiting, remembering. The night lay heavy upon the village, and the courtyard where children once played now breathed only silence. The old daycare stood at its center, its paint peeling like the skin of forgotten time. The windows flickered faintly with reflections of the moon, not from light, but from eyes unseen. The air was thick with the scent of dust, wood, and something faintly sweet, like sorrow hiding beneath jasmine. Kwezi stopped at the gate, her heartbeat echoing in her ears. Once, this place had been filled with laughter, songs of innocence, the chatter of tiny feet dancing to morning light. Now that laughter returned in whispers, floating through the wind like memories refusing to rest. She whispered to herself, "Why does it sound like they are crying?" The wind did not answer. It carried only the faint hum of a child's tune, low, rhythmic, and strange. The same tune Temba had been humming for weeks. She stepped closer, her feet brushing over dry leaves. The building seemed to lean toward her, as though it remembered her voice, her scent, her fear. Each window shimmered with a faint gleam, and for a heartbeat she thought she saw faces, small, smiling, fading as quickly as they appeared. "Temba?" she called softly. No response, only the sound of wooden beams sighing under the weight of time. Then, without a single hand upon it, the door groaned open. Its hinges cried out like an old spirit disturbed from sleep. Quasi froze. Her breath caught in her throat. "Temba! Wait!" she called again, but the boy had already stepped inside. His small frame disappeared into the darkness beyond the door. Quasi hesitated at the threshold. The air that poured out was heavy, thick with the scent of river clay, damp soil, and something older than words. It smelled like the earth after burial. Mama Nyasha said never to go inside alone, she whispered, but she couldn't stop. Her heart led her where her fear told her not to go. Inside, shadows clung to the walls like cobwebs. The hum grew louder, a child's tune carrying the weight of 1,000 echoes. Quasi's eyes darted around the dim light until she saw Temba kneeling by the old play corner, his small fingers brushing against the wooden floor. "Temba, what are you doing?" she whispered, voice trembling. He didn't look up. "They're calling," he said softly. "They're waiting. Who's waiting?" "The ones Mama Nyasha promised to bring back." Before she could speak again, his hand pressed against a loose wooden plank. The board shifted with a sigh, and beneath it, a faint blue light shimmered, like moonlight trapped beneath the earth. The glow pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. Quasi's breath caught. "Temba, what is that?" He looked up at her, eyes distant and strange. "It's where they sleep," he whispered. She knelt beside him, trembling, and lifted the plank. A rush of cold air kissed her face. Beneath the floor lay a small chamber, its walls lined with tiny wooden figures. Hand-carved dolls, each one with a child's face, some smiling, some weeping, all staring back with glassy eyes that glimmered faintly in the blue light. And then, a whisper. "Faint but clear. We are not lost." Quasi stumbled backward, clutching Temba to her chest. The whisper rose like a tide, hundreds of small voices murmuring in sorrow and longing. The dolls' eyes shimmered brighter, their wooden faces shifting almost imperceptibly, as though remembering who they once were. Temba's voice was soft against her shoulder. "They only wanted to be remembered." Quasi turned, and there at the doorway stood Mama Nyasha. Her figure was cloaked in pale moonlight, her veil trailing like mist. Her eyes, deep, endless, and weary, carried the weight of centuries. "Do not fear them," she said gently. "They are not cursed, only waiting for love to find them again." Quasi trembled. You did this?" Mama Nyasha stepped closer, her shadow long and heavy. "I gave them rest when the world forgot their names." The wind outside rose suddenly, carrying the faint rhythm of distant drums, a heartbeat of the ancestors. And as Quasi looked into Mama Nyasha's eyes, she saw it, both life and death intertwined. Mercy and sorrow walking hand in hand, the old woman whispered. "Every mother bears 2 children, one of flesh and one of memory. Which will you keep alive, child?" The air grew still. The dolls fell silent, and for the first time Quasi understood. The courtyard was not haunted. It was waiting. Mama Nyasha's voice trembled as the truth began to pour from her like a river breaking its banks. "I begged them," she said softly, her eyes glistening with the blue shimmer of spirit light. "I begged the river spirits to let me protect the lost ones, the children taken before their time." Her voice quivered between guilt and love. "I wanted to guard them from pain, to give them the warmth the world denied." Her hands shook as she touched the wooden floor, the glow beneath it pulsing with each word. "The spirits listened, but they are never kind without balance. They granted me power, yet twisted it into a curse. For every soul I sheltered, a piece of my own heart was taken. They said no mother could hold the river forever." Quasi's lips parted in disbelief, her heart pounding like a drum before a storm. "You mean," she whispered, "you bound them here?" Mama Nyasha nodded slowly, tears carving lines down her face. "Each one rests beneath my care, safe from pain, safe from the cruelty of fate. But I did not see the chain they placed upon me. Every blessing I gave became a wound, every act of love, a theft from destiny." She lifted her sleeve, revealing faint marks running along her arm, glowing faintly like ripples of water in the dark. "These are the marks of the living and the dead," she said. "Every child I touch carries a bond, half in the light, half in the shadows. Their joy feeds their peace, but their peace feeds my grief." The dolls beneath the floor stirred faintly, whispering like restless spirits remembering their names. Queasy stepped back, her breath uneven. "You stole them!" she cried, her voice breaking. "You took their souls and caged them in this place. You made them prisoners in the name of love." Mama Nyasha's eyes widened, her voice desperate. "No, child. I saved them. The world took them before their time. Hunger, fever, war. I only offered them sanctuary." Her words cut through the air like thunder, but Queasy's pain rose higher. "You cannot save them by chaining their spirits. You cannot heal grief by holding what must go." The words tore through the silence, sharp as blades. The air thickened. Outside, the wind began to howl, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. The dolls' eyes flickered to life, glowing with blue fire as their tiny mouths began to murmur in unison. Not cries of fear, but songs of release. The chamber filled with the sound of ancestral voices rising in fury. Dust swirled, and the scent of rain and river clay grew stronger. The air itself seemed to speak, the ancestors stirring from the depths of forgotten time. Lightning cracked across the sky, its light flooding through the cracks in the floor. Queasy fell to her knees, clutching her son as Mama Nyasha's veil whipped in the storm. In that blinding light, Queasy saw it, mercy and madness sharing the same face. Mama Nyasha's love was real, yet twisted by pain and desperation. The curse had not made her evil. It had made her human in the most tragic way. "Love," Queasy whispered through her tears, "when it tries to cage what it cherishes, becomes the cruelest curse of all." Then came the voices, deep, powerful, echoing through the storm. "You cannot heal grief by binding the living," they thundered. The earth itself shuddered, and the doll's blue glow began to fade. Mama Nyasha's cry filled the air, half sorrow, half surrender, as the chamber cracked open. The power unraveled, the spirits lifted like mist in the morning sun, freed from the curse that bound them. The storm raged above, but beneath its fury came peace. A silence soft and sacred, as if the ancestors themselves had laid their burden down. Mama Nyasha stood in the center of the chamber, her face glistening with tears that caught the light like falling stars. Her arms trembled as she lifted them toward the heavens, her voice breaking through the heavy air. "Go, my children," she whispered. "Go where pain cannot find you." A soft wind rose, carrying her words into the darkness. The dolls beneath the floor began to shimmer, their tiny faces glowing with the warmth of release. Then, one by one, lights burst forth, small, delicate orbs that danced through the cracks in the roof and soared into the night sky. Their laughter, pure and light as dawn mist, echoed through the air before fading into silence. Mama Nyasha's tears turned to smiles as she watched them vanish, their spirits returning to the river that had once cursed and blessed her all the same. As dawn crept over the horizon, she knelt among the broken toys, her voice rising in the language of the ancients, a chant older than the hills and softer than morning rain. "Nkumeya miri, ekwela hala nefu," she murmured, her song rippling through the quiet like the current of a sacred river. Her voice wove sorrow and peace into one melody, the farewell of a mother who had given all she had. The air shimmered, thick with the presence of spirits finally free. Then came the sound, soft cracks like shells breaking open, as the dolls split gently, releasing faint glows that swirled into the morning mist. The lights floated upward, twining together in a spiral of gold and blue before fading with the rising sun. The laughter that followed was not haunting, but joyful, the sound of children returning home. Mama Nyasha sank to her knees, her strength slipping away like water through open palms. Her breath grew shallow, her eyes glimmered with peace. A faint smile curved her lips as she whispered, "They are safe now." Her head bowed, and the stillness that followed was not death. It was fulfillment. The river had taken her offering, and the balance was restored. Far beyond the ruins of her home, beneath the wide arms of the baobab tree, Temba stirred. The first touch of sunlight kissed his face, and his eyes fluttered open, clear, bright, untouched by shadow. He blinked at the morning light, the hum that once haunted his lips now gone. Beside him, a small wooden doll lay cracked and empty, its carvings faded to dust. The wind sighed gently through the trees, carrying the last whisper of Mama Nyasha's song. And as the village of Mbanza woke, the air was light again, cleansed, quiet, and whole. The curse had ended, but her story, like all tales of the ancestors, would live on in the hearts of those who remembered. The morning light spilled softly over Mbanza, washing away the shadows of the long night. The village awoke to a strange calm, as if the earth itself had exhaled after years of holding its breath. Temba stirred beneath the great baobab, his small hands clutching the hem of his tunic. He blinked at the golden sky, the memory of storm and song fading like mist. There were no voices now, no haunting laughter, no whisper of the river's hymn. Only peace. He could not remember the woman's chant or the cries of unseen children. All he recalled was that Mama Nyasha once sang to the stars. Inside her hut, his mother sat by the dying fire. Her eyes were heavy, her lips trembling with prayers she could not speak. She looked at her son, whole, breathing, alive, and tears slid down her cheeks. She knew what it had cost. The boy's peace had been bought with the last breath of a woman who gave everything. "Sleep, my son," she whispered, "for your dreams are no longer haunted." But deep within her heart, she mourned the silence left behind, the silence of Mama Nyasha's final song. When the sun rose high, the villagers found her beneath the ancient baobab. Mama Nyasha lay as though resting after a long journey, her head tilted slightly toward the sky. Her lips curved in a soft smile, like one who had seen mercy beyond the clouds. Her hands were folded over her chest, fingers still stained with earth and river dust, the mark of one who served both the living and the lost. Birds gathered quietly in the branches above her, and even the wind hushed its voice. The people stood in awe, for there was peace around her body that words could not explain. They carried her back to the place she loved, the small daycare at the heart of Mbanza. There they wrapped her in white cloth, pure as the morning dew. The women sang lullabies as they laid her in the red earth, their voices trembling with love and grief. The men planted flowers near her grave, bright petals mixed with river reeds, symbolizing the souls she had set free. Children stood nearby, clutching their mothers' skirts, watching in silence. None cried, for they somehow understood. The soul keeper had simply gone home. From that day forward, the villagers gave her a name that would never fade, the Mother of Forgotten Souls. To them, she was no longer just a caretaker, but a spirit of mercy, a guardian who turned sorrow into love. Her story became a light in dark times, a lesson whispered to mothers and children alike, that love, when given without fear, could heal even the deepest wound. Years passed, and Mbanza grew. Yet every season when the river swelled and the wind sang through the baobab, the people gathered by the fire. The elders' voices carried her tale once more, of the woman who sang to the stars, who freed lost souls with her final breath. Children leaned close, their faces lit by the flicker of flame. They listened, wide-eyed, as her name drifted through the night like a prayer. Mama Nyasha. And in that moment, her spirit lived again, in memory, in story, and in every child who dreamed beneath the African sky. In the years that followed, the people of Mbanza did not forget the woman who sang to the stars. Her name became both a song and a warning, a whisper carried on the wind that rustled through the baobab leaves. Elders told how she had dared to challenge the balance set by the ancestors, how her love had reached beyond the veil that separated the living from the spirits. They said the river itself had once turned silent to honor her courage, for she had done what few ever dared. She had chosen love over the law of spirits. But they also spoke of how her heart, pure though it was, had blurred the line between healing and harm. Love, said the old griot, tapping his staff against the earth, is a river that can cleanse or drown. It depends on how one drinks. Her compassion, though born of sorrow, became a song that outlived her curse. Mothers sang it to their children at night, not as a tale of fear, but of a heart that burned too brightly to know its own danger. And so, the story came to rest in the hearts of the people, a living truth woven into the rhythm of their lives. When love defies the will of the ancestors, the griots would say as the firelight danced upon their faces, even kindness can cast a shadow. The villagers did not speak those words to condemn her. No, they spoke them to remember her sacrifice. For they knew now that love, though powerful, must walk hand in hand with wisdom. They taught their children that compassion without understanding can awaken storms that even the bravest cannot calm. Yet in every song, in every prayer whispered beneath the moonlight, Mama Nyasha's spirit lingered, not as a curse, but as a reminder. Her story became a mirror for every heart that dared to love too deeply, too blindly. And in the glow of the village fires, the people still spoke her name softly, with both sorrow and reverence. The mother of forgotten souls, they would say, their voices trembling like wind through reeds. She gave everything, and in giving, taught us that love must not only heal, but also obey. And so, her tale lived on, not in fear, but in truth, carried through generations like the eternal hum of the river she once called home.